Welcome to LiliCon. LiliCon is named after Scott Lilienfeld, so I thought we'd just kind of open up with a few words. And maybe his most famous book is this 50 Great Myths. I went to a teaching conference on psychology, and folks were actually using these 50 myths as learning outcomes. They were checking and to see if their graduating students believed in any of those myths as a cross-check. So I thought that was kind of astonishing. I thought what maybe a good way to start the conference would be to kind of reflect on some of the lessons learned. And it turns out he wrote a foreword to this book by Kaufman and Kaufman, which we have on a table over here, which I'll give further explanation of in a minute. But in that preface we lost him in 2020. So 2018, this is kind of like right there where he was kind of helping us think about the refutational method and trying to sell it hard. So this is the foreword, Navigating a Post-Truth World, 10 Enduring Lessons from the Study of Pseudoscience. And it turns out this foreword's about 5 pages, and tour de force, it includes 35 citations. So I thought that was kind of amazing. But let's just kind of think about some of these. So the first one is, we are all biased. We are largely unaware of our biases. We'll learn more about that today. And science is a systematic set of safeguards against biases. Now that philosophers in the room and some of us think, well, that's not all science is, obviously, but I think it's a good slogan for what we're trying to do here. And of course, the book that I created some of my content with is How We Know What Isn't So, this book here. So it turns out that we did a survey of all the folks that were in the Lilienfeld Alliance. We were trying to share resources, and we came up with tons of syllabi. We analyzed those syllabi, we looked at what books are being used, and we actually published it in a paper. And then that kind of inspired us to create this table over here, this little library of the books that are being used by some of our members, and then we kind of expanded on that and built on it. We've even indexed them a little bit with little cards that tell you if it's refutational or not, kind of the discipline in which it is taught. We have a little bit of a classification scheme. It's not the only way to classify things, but we thought it might be a little bit useful. So take a look at the table over there, and we'll kind of think about that as we go through this a bit more. So I think these first 3 bullet points are beautifully in this book, How We Know What Isn't So, and the cognitive biases and stuff that I put into my classroom came from that one. The next thing is scientific thinking does not come naturally to the human species. Well, a friend of mine, Robert Carroll, we lost him way too early too. You might know the Skeptic's Dictionary from a long time ago. It's still up, but an amazing fella, and he wrote this book. It was the last book he published. It was Unnatural Acts, a provocative title, as always, from Mr. Carroll, Professor Carroll. So that kind of reflects on some of the things that Scott was saying there. Scientific thinking is exasperatingly domain specific. A couple of things on that. He refers to this paper by, let's see if the name here, Willingham. Interesting paper. But the criticism is a little bit in this paper aimed at folks that kind of think of critical thinking as higher level Bloom's taxonomy and not necessarily the set of learning outcomes and strategies and stuff that we want our students from the refutational technique. But it does make us think that maybe every domain, every like psychology, engineering, everything should have its own course dedicated to kind of this refutational, because every discipline has its false beliefs that are out there and kind of harm. So we'll hear a little bit later from Katie about a class that she developed for child and family science. However, it kind of suggests that we shouldn't be teaching it in a general education format. That the paper kind of makes this case. I would like to disagree with that a little bit, room for discussion. But then he also said pseudoscience and science lie on a spectrum. This is Larry Loudon, if you know the philosopher, he kind of made this case. No sharp line. But that doesn't mean we can't look at the extremes. And so he also mentions that pseudoscience is characterized by a set of fallible but useful warning signs. I like to call these the characteristics of pseudoscience, and I have my students look at these kind of warning signs. And that is really well contained in this book. 2 philosophers, Schick and Vaughan, have, I think this is in their 9th edition now, and it's a book that I've used. It's a thin book, but it has, I think, the toolkit that is so essential. It's perfect for kind of a general education course on trying to give students the tools to tell science from pseudoscience. He also mentions that pseudoscientific claims differ from erroneous claims. This one's a little bit hard to parse. Scientific and pseudoscientific thinking are cut from the same basic psychological cloth. This one he was kind of mentioning with Tversky and Kahneman. We're showing that there's these heuristics that we use. I think they work well most of the time, but then they spectacularly do not work sometimes. And so that's one way to frame what he was getting at there. And then finally, skepticism differs from cynicism. And of course, that's kind of in the preamble of almost every one of these magazines here, that clearly rational skepticism is different than cynicism. And so we'll celebrate that. And thank you so much, Steve, for telling me about that cover, the dragons. And yeah, the metaphor is nice. This is the paper that we wrote, kind of capturing what Lilienfeld Alliance members teach in their courses. And that's kind of sets the stage for the books over there. So please take one to the table, look at these books. We're really excited about that. So I wanted to focus on the title of his foreword, Navigating a Post-Truth World. Now, if you could think of an image that kind of captures the post-truth world at this time, what kind of image comes to mind? What, if you could just kind of sum it up in one image? Here's my attempt. Wow, right? So interestingly, the Wikipedia page is pretty prescient on this. Says here, it characterizes RFK, conspiracy theorist, anti-vaccine activist, serving as the 26th United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Post-truth, we are there, and we have our work cut out for us, everybody. But Wikipedia for the win. Susan, did you help put the facts on this page? Because oh, good. So I would say a shining beacon of hope in this post-truth world is the truth you can find on Wikipedia. We'll hear more about that later. So we are on the CSU campus. This is one of 22. We are kind of proud to be in the CSU system. We serve 400,000 students. And interesting, in the late 80s, statewide, they mandated that every GE program would have a required 3-unit critical thinking course. And however, that was used to be the domain strictly of philosophy department, but clearly there wasn't enough philosophers to teach all of these courses. So they expanded it so anybody could teach a critical thinking course. And so you might have seen this poster yesterday, but I would just like to brag about some of our students. They have this poster over here that was looking at, well, what disciplines are teaching the critical thinking courses on these 22 campuses, and what is the content, as much as we could glean from their syllabi. And so alarmingly, we found that 10% of them don't seem to teach any critical thinking content as far as we can tell by most definitions. And others, we're not really sure they're using a strategic refutational approach that we know reduce false beliefs. So one thing that we would like to do at the Alliance is to kind of encourage those courses that are being taught under this umbrella of critical thinking to worry about the fact that our students believe in pseudoscience just as much as the general public. And remember, there's some vetting to get into the university. So we would hope that this would already be lower by the time they got here. But this is from our 2018 study where we polled our students in classes where they're mostly sophomores and juniors. And they believed in these false claims and false beliefs just as much, if not more, in some instances, as some of the general public. So we need to fix this, right? And we think that we do have some answers. So coming back to, it's frustratingly domain specific. I think there still is a really big opportunity in these GE classes to move the needle. And a lot of the Lilienfeld Alliance members have such kind of general education courses. I teach one. I've been teaching it since 2000, and I call it Science and Nonsense. I kind of gave a nice description of it at the last LiliCon. If you guys have a course, I would love to get nerdy and compare our learning outcomes and maybe some of our strategies. But it turns out that I've kind of, can we move the needle? So part of my final exam has basically a reflection essay component. And I asked them, of all the things we've talked about, did your mind change on any of those? And I think it's a vividness effect, because chiropractic is one of the last things we talk about, because it's kind of a complicated topic and we have to get into some details of science. But it really seems to be changing some minds. And so now this is not a really strictly a scientific survey of any kind, but it gives us a hint. We did do a more scientific survey, and it turns out when you use refutation, it does work. Famously, Carl Sagan said that pseudoscience is believed in proportion to how little science is understood. But we checked that. And this is kind of like Scott mentioned the analogy he said of the Alka-Seltzer method. If we just give them the tools of science, then all the false beliefs will melt away. And it turns out this doesn't seem to be the case. And we checked it, right? We looked at research methods classes in psychology and given the pre and post test on these false beliefs, and it didn't move the needle at all. But the class that I was teaching and others were teaching using the syllabus that we shared, did move the needle on all of these. So I think there's definitely room to insert some of this refutational approach into these critical thinking classes and really make a difference in this post-truth world, I hope. So just in the theme of the last LiliCon, Rod shared some of the strange things. And so if you need some things to refute, California has quite a few, right? So I just wanted to bring a few of these so you had this in your packet. This is just tongue in cheek, but nonetheless, one thing that I like to point out is Scientology, right? That's right across the street where yours truly was born in Hollywood, right? So they built it like 5 years after, so I was there. So it's kind of awkward to go down in that part of the neighborhood and see that there. By the way, so this one's on the map, and the Rosicrucians have some interesting ideas, but they actually have some real Egyptian artifacts in San Jose. It's worth the price of admission. It's a spectacular, oh, you know what I'm talking about, Kissy? Yeah, spectacular. Just, however, if you have any interest in astronomy, do not go to their planetarium show. You'll just be really upset. But the Egyptian artifacts are fantastic, even a recreation of King Tut's tomb, if I remember correctly. So that's worth the price of admission. But UFOs, right? So the UFO sighting, the Tic Tac that's in the news, they're how we rebranded as UAPs, I guess, these days, right? Talk about a fuzzy blob getting a lot of attention, right? The Tic Tac. That happened down off the coast of California, just in case we have our share of UFOs. By the way, the best footage of Bigfoot ever shot was in California. Matter of fact, it's been unmatched. In 40 years, no one has caught better video than this video of Bigfoot. So we'll let that sit with you for a little while. And finally, not to be abandoned in the cryptozoology world, Fresno has something called the Fresno Nightcrawler. Anybody Fresno Nightcrawler fans? You guys know of it? Oh, wow, okay. So Fresno Nightcrawler, here it is. It looks kind of like a disembodied pair of white corduroy pants walking on its own. This is really all we have to go on, but so we're competing with the fuzzy blob down in the left corner, walking fuzzy blob, and that is the Fresno Nightcrawler, not to be outdone by any other cryptozoology schemes. It actually has a Wikipedia page, so you know it's legit. And that is my summary of LiliCon. I hope that you have a wonderful time, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the talks and contributions. And with that, we'll start the show a little bit early. How about? Okay. Great.